Ah, this is strategic use. Satya, Satya, want to sit? Okay. Okay, welcome back, everybody. I think we've had a fascinating opening sessions, keynote, and experiences from on the ground. I think a lot of people have shared their challenges and issues of doing work on the ground. And I think the rest of the day, across two panels, we will be deliberating some of those issues. The first panel will be on perspective of buyers, registries, and assessors in developing and financing NbS projects. And then we will have lunch, uh, hopefully for about 45 minutes. And then we'll come back for panel 2, which will be ecosystem creation for ease of business, environmental law, policy, and taxation. Before we close the day with some discussions, I think a lot of people had mentioned that the platform is titled Planet Dialogue. Last year, we didn't have enough opportunity to dialogue with people. I think while the venue restrictions kind of impose certain limitations on how far we can stretch the dialogue here, but we can assure you that these conversations are going to carry through even after the event and much after that. We will ensure that most of the people have access to each other's emails and are able to then follow up and chat with them, either ask questions or share their suggestions and inputs, and the conversation and dialogue will stretch far beyond the current day's events. So thank you very much for coming here and joining us. Welcome again to the online guests also who are attending. Just as a matter of detail, I thought it might be useful for for all of you to know that I am Sudhir Sahani. I don't think I had the opportunity of introducing myself or anybody did that. So I am Sudhir Sahani. Thank you. I am your host for the day, as you must have guessed. So I have done about 28 years of advertising and communication business before I ventured into the development sector. I worked with Pradhan, much talked about during the course of the day today, for about 8 years, and had to retire because I turned 60. But I am willing to stay active in the sector, and that's what I'm seeking to do by meeting a lot of stakeholders and interesting people like you. So I hope to remain active. But I must tell you that when I joined Pradhan, I went to one of the community meetings and I immediately became part of those conversations. A lot of people said communities have a lot to share, we have a lot to learn from them. And I became part of the conversation as the community spoke about their challenges. When one of the women, Didi, told me, she said, "Kya dada? आप अपना परिचय तो दिए नहीं?" And that's when I realized that it's important for us to introduce ourselves before we start speaking. I don't think I have carried that lesson very well. So I'm a little delayed in introducing myself. So, but I'm hoping that the lessons that we learn here and some of the lessons that we have learned from other speakers' experiences, we will carry through. So, so that's why I'm saying the dialogue needs to continue. And I think some of the learnings that we take from each other would be useful as we go along. Okay. So that was that. And now let's get started with panel 1. As I mentioned, this is about perspective of buyers, registries, assessors in developing and financing nature-based solutions. We have an interesting panel here. First, Mr. Amit Anand. He is the CEO at Carbon Check Private Limited. Amit Anand is a seasoned expert in carbon markets with over 20 years of experience in consulting, GHG auditing, and sustainability leadership. He has deep expertise in renewable energy, energy efficiency, and management systems. Amit serves on key technical committees related to forestry, carbon markets, and green credits. He has studied environmental sciences at Delhi University, completed his master's in environmental management from Forest Research Institute, and is a qualified ISO 14001 lead auditor and technical reviewer for major offset standards. Welcome. Next, we have Archit Srivastav. Archit is the Vice President, Growth and Strategy at Earthood. He brings over 15 years of experience in sustainability and climate change, currently leading organic growth and business strategy at Earthood, a global leader in carbon auditing. He has driven innovation in decarbonization and has a strong background in sustainable architecture, energy efficiency, and solar PV. His expertise spans green building audits, carbon pricing, and revenue mechanisms. Archit holds an MBA in oil and gas management and has presented at international forums with several published papers to his credit. Welcome, Archit. Given 15 years of experience, I would expect he's perhaps one of the younger people around. So we perhaps have a lot to learn from him on how we look at the future. Welcome, Archit. Our next person on the panel is Ms. Shreya Garg. Hi, Shreya. Shreya is a climate professional with 14 years of experience across the carbon markets, spanning emissions, reduction, avoidance, and both natural and engineered carbon removals. As the former Vice President of Operations at Earthood, she led auditing operations across 15 plus global standards, giving her a unique vantage point into systemic gaps and gray areas in the ecosystem. Building on that foundation, she now contributes expert guidance to strengthen carbon market credibility, serving as a roster expert for gold standard and leading verification systems at Isometric. At FCF India, which is, I guess, Fair Climate Fund, she applies this insight to project development, helping shape credible, high-integrity carbon and biodiversity initiatives from the ground up. Welcome, Shreya. We also have among us Takeshi Seo. I hope I've got your name right. Takeshi-san. Takeshi-san is a manager at the Forest Resource Business Development of Marubeni Corporation, leading afforestation, reforestation, and revegetation projects in Southeast Asia and India. He specializes in trading high-quality nature-based solutions, carbon dioxide removal credits. With deep forestry experience, including a leadership role in Indonesia, Malaysia, Thailand, Australia, and other regions. He's committed to aligning decarbonization, nature positive goals with sustainable business, and holds a degree in business management from Ritsumeikan University. Okay, Ritsumeikan. Again, I think somebody mentioned earlier in the day that while we are talking about India, there's a lot that we can learn from the region and beyond. So we expect you to bring in some of that learning. Thank you so much for joining us. The panel is going to be moderated by Jatin Kapoor. Jatin is head of climate transactions for Emergent Ventures India. Welcome, Jatin. Jatin leads the environmental EVI's climate transaction business, managing a global team to develop and market environmental attributes. With 20 years of experience, he focuses on building nature and community-based offset portfolios in India and Southeast Asia. He has advised governments on climate policy in India, Thailand, Malaysia, and Laos, and delivered sustainability solutions across industries. So again, he brings in a lot of experience from across the globe, which would be very useful, I would imagine, as a moderator. Jatin has led consulting business in carbon markets and renewable energy. He holds a degree in chemical engineering, an MBA, and certification in climate and renewable energy finance. So quite a fascinating panel and ever so interesting moderator that we have amongst us. Over to you, Jatin.
Can I have the mic? I would prefer to sit and then give it more of a shape of a discussion than
sure.
Well, thank you, Sudhir, and thanks to the participants who presented before this. I think it was very interesting to see a lot of challenges and issues being highlighted. We would attempt to provide solutions to some of those issues, or at least answer some of the burning questions that the audience has. How I would prefer to run the next 45 minutes or so, uh, because we are standing between this session right now and the lunch. So we have to be very mindful of time. So what we would prefer to do is we'll go I'll ask a few questions to all of you uh, in the first round, and then we'll have another round of questions after that, and then leave it on to the audience. I hope that's all right. Um, so we talked about issues related to funding. We talked about issues related to not so standard standards and methodologies. We talked about uh, issues related to on-ground implementation on land titles and land rights for sometimes 20 years, sometimes up to 40 years. Uh, we also touched upon issues related to benefit sharing with the community. And is there a percentage everybody likes to work with? Is there something that the buyers prefer? Or it's completely dependent on the project design? Um, I would also add some aspects, my 2 cents, because as a transaction facilitator, that's typically what I do. Add my 2 cents to whatever inputs you guys provide. Uh, so I would start with Shreya. Shreya, it'll be very useful for everybody if you could draw an overarching picture of different types of NbS projects to start with. What all are the different types of NbS projects specific to carbon methodologies and standards? And is there something beyond Vera and gold standard that we can look at?
Yeah. Thank you, Jatin. I think a lot of nature-based projects were discussed in the morning, which were mainly around ARR and agroforestry. In addition to that, uh, there are other categories of project that could be considered in Indian context are alternate wetland drying, which I think was brought up by VNV in their session, AWD, mangrove restoration, which is wetland restoration, and um, and good old Red Plus projects also could be a good consideration. And their methodologies by various standards, there's our favorite VM47 that is highly critiqued or highly discussed. In addition to VM47, you have VM42, which also provides a wide range of solutions around regenerative agriculture, which was also a subject in the morning. And they do provide certain solutions in trying to standardize on how the projects are being assessed right now across regions. So it is not a person specific approach, but it is more a systematic approach, a more uniform approach. And if I talk about the emerging trends, you know, or let's talk about solutions beyond Vera and gold standard. So there are emerging registries that are coming up, Isometric, Pure Earth, which is not into nature-based solutions right now, but open forest protocol being one of the other solutions that people could look at. So a lot of registries that are regional, and of course we have our own registry, the Indian Carbon Registry also, which has forestry is one of the kind of the projects that you have.
And are they very different to each other? Say a ARR methodology in gold standard versus ARR methodology in Vera. Uh, how does the project developer decide?
So the eligibility criteria, if you talk about the traditional registries, if you talk about Vera and gold standard, I think the eligibility criteria pretty much remains the same. There's a little bit of variation around how the monitoring can happen, the monitoring requirements, the stringency. But if you talk about the new age registries that are emerging, the backbone therein is about technology. They're more tech driven and they're more reliability, transparency, and the focus around credibility.
Continuing with that, Archit, if you could also add to on a similar point, we're talking about different eligibility requirements. Some methodologies are relatively relaxed. Some are very strict on both not just eligibility, but also monitoring and verification. Uh, uh, can you also, explain that with possibly some examples as well? How again, how does a project developer decide what to select and what's best for my project?
So there are all kinds of project developers in the world. So there could be some who would select a methodology basis the number of credits that they are going to generate from that methodology. The other pool of developers could be, yes, I understand that this methodology is going to be very stringent, very strict, but that would also give me an edge or rather an ease in selling my carbon credits or rather at a premium as well. So the choice of the methodology is very, very subjective to the project developer. It's not just about the methodology as well, and at times also about the standard and the requirements of the standards. So it's a mixed bag of that. Uh, at the same time, we have seen these methodologies evolve over the past several years. I mean, they are bound to evolve. And by nature, they are getting stringent and more stringent by the day, which is also kind of the need of the hour because we have seen that there have been a lot of issues with respect to certain methodologies across various standards, which have been tainted with over-crediting or over-issuance of credits. So just to tighten the screws over there, so the standards do come up with updates every now and then. So the much talked about methodology uh, in the forestry sector with Vera. So when the updates rolled out, so it looked like not a haircut, but more of a head cut in terms of the emission reductions that one can claim. Also, another challenge that we have seen is that the regionalization of the methodology has not been there uh, quite a lot, I would say. Uh, the standards not being standards enough. So uh, there are various examples. I mean, if we look at VM42, which is again a Vera methodology for sustainable agriculture land management practices, methodology conceived, developed by US operated entities and then approved by Vera, which is also a US based entity, we may not necessarily understand what are the challenges that the project developer would face here in India. Simple reason being the average land holding size is just too small that if you ask for land records, if you ask for the carbon rights agreement or the land rights agreement from each of those developers, then even a rent agreement here in India is roughly 3 pages or 4 pages on a stamp paper. And if you are asking for that kind of a project developer to come up with these documents, these legal documents, and the project developer anyways has to reach out to hell a lot of farmers to make the project financially feasible in the first place. So the simple question that comes to my mind naturally is that yes, it is important. I do understand that, but as you being the standard, are you going to run through those 800,000 pages? It's practically impossible. So digitization could be one of the ways to go about it, but switching to another methodology, which is the revetting of peatlands. So the peatlands come from, in such a topography is a geography which is very, very different from one another. So the peatland can be very different from one in Indonesia and one in Russia. So, but the methodology is very limited and it's only one. So, like Satya sir was also mentioning during his talks, that it's very generic in nature. It's not regionalized. And that's why it's open to interpretation, which leads to a lot of branches of understanding.
Now, is regionalization of methodologies something that is being worked upon? Do you see that happening at all with the standards, or not so much?
Actually, not so much. But I think the need of the hour is that we need to have certain region specific methodologies. I'm not talking about India as just one country or Nepal as one country. Maybe we can look at something which is more Southeast Asia specific. Maybe we can look at something which is more African specific. So that should be ideally the way to go so that the project developers can also take a informed decision as to what this methodology holds for them
Right.
and what are the requirements that they would need to comply with.
Moving on to Amit. Amit, we had this question from the audience as well, talking about the all discussions focusing on ARR, agroforestry as well, but not so much about regenerative agriculture and projects under VM42 possibly. Uh, why is that? Even if you look at the laundry list of projects at listing stage on Mera or Gold Standard, you have like about 160 ARR projects and then possibly only a handful agriculture-based projects. Why is that so I mean, in a country like India?
Hello, everyone. So, just to answer your question, with regards to VM42, the first and foremost, the challenge was from standard side because they took a lot of time in coming out with a methodology. Some project developers started with the project, and in mid of the project, they found that the methodology has undergone revision. So now that's was one of the challenges where
Same was the case with AWDAs.
so suddenly the stakeholder loses confidence in whether whether I'm on the right path or not. Then, as Archit rightly said, this methodology was developed for a different geography. Now in India, you have very small land holdings, close to 0.74 hectares as per the new NABARD survey. So, and the credits from SOC at best is zero point 0.2 to 0.3 tons of CO2 per hectare. So to develop a project which is feasible from all stakeholders' point of view, from financial institutions' point of view, from project developers' point of view, from consultants' point of view, from implementers' point of view, is a huge challenge. As Swapan also mentioned in his presentation, land rights, land tenures, land agreements. And then how do you manage that? Working with farmers, gaining the confidence of communities, and then all of a sudden you find that the methodology is being revised. You can't claim credits for this. The credits are being reduced. Now you have promised something to the community in return, and then you're not going to be true to your words. So you cannot do the next project with them.
That's a big problem. 3 years, 4 years down the line, when I see a lot of these projects actually issuing credits, and the credits are 1/10 of what they were initially imagined to be.
And then one of the persons from the audience also asked the question about continuation of the practices. When you talk about VM42, you want to continue with those regenerative practices, no tillage, cover crops. So these are behavioral projects. You have to first understand that you want to change the behavior, how the agriculture is being done traditionally, the knowledge that has been passed to them from generations to generations. There is a fear of loss of reduction in productivity, loss of yield. Are you going to compensate for that when the methodology may change, your credits may reduce? So there are a lot of ifs and buts. So just to foster the confidence in all the stakeholders, the standard also has to be robust, and then they should stick with certain revisions. So I think there are a lot of gray areas in that, and then also like setting up a baseline. You go and ask a farmer, how was your tillage practice 2 years down the line? He is busy. That is subsistence agriculture for him. He's not going to give information, what is my fertilizer input. So all these factors are there, and that is why I think there are a lot of challenges in that we see that we don't have.
But potentially the scale could be huge, right? In a country like India, I think any of these regenerative agricultural practices, if they are adopted by the community, the potential could be huge. And I'm sure there are project developers who are working on it and struggling with the methodology changes and the difficulties in monitoring and verification, sampling based only, like Swapn mentioned. But uh, are there inflow of projects that you audit, for example? Are you seeing an increase lately?
I don't see a significant increase in VM42 projects. There were early starters. There were projects which were done at the very beginning when VM42 was introduced first time. And then it became a methodology that wanted to cover each and every aspect of agriculture in a single methodology. So they didn't want to leave anything outside of this methodology. And I think possibly that has led to a lot of complications in the methodology, how you apply the methodology, how you monitor the methodology, because you have not, probably the idea could be that there was a methodology for reduction of nitrogenous fertilizer. They should have let that methodology continue and not discontinue that methodology. So there were options available, but then they tried to bring everything
In one umbrella.
under one umbrella, and probably that has led to a lot of complications as well. So
we also touched upon, the complications with the new VM47 methodology, specifically with regards to dynamic baselining. Can you, in very simple terms, explain what is dynamic baselining and how difficult it could be in a country like India?
See, VM47 again is a methodology that is developed by consultants who are from different geography altogether, European and US based. And dynamic baseline is a concept where you have performance monitoring. So you take an area, a plot outside your project area, and then you take that area, and that is called a control plot, which should have similar characteristics to your project area. And then there are metrics on which you can say that these are two similar areas. And then in that control area, you monitor the natural rate of growth of the biomass. And then in your project area, you monitor whatever growth that has happened because of the project's intervention, and the delta is your credit. So that's what dynamic baseline is. But as you said, VM47 now, I was looking at the recent revisions, and there is because you can use performance benchmark and dynamic baseline only for area-based approach.
Correct.
An area-based approach says that for direct planting, which is the case of afforestation, reforestation projects in India, the project area or the instance area should be a contiguous parcel of at least 1 hectare or 1 hectare. Right. So now again, when you have an agricultural holding which is at 0.74 hectares, a single farmer, how are you going to get a contiguous parcel of 1 hectare?
Right.
And then it is applicable in the case of the lesser area is applicable in case of natural regeneration, where you let the forests grow or then you exclude the grazing areas. But that's not the actual practice that's happening in Indian NbS space. So you can see that's the contradiction that we have. So
there's a very clear need for
regional methodology.
Regional methodologies.
Regional
I think this will, this is definitely as a community working on carbon projects, together at least for the last 15, 20 years. This is something that we all should very strongly take up with the standards. That's one action item I can very clearly see. Moving on to where the money is to fund everything that we're talking about. Takeshi-san, welcome to the session. I want to understand broadly from you, what are buyers or what are investors looking for when they're looking at NbS projects? What kind of specific typical indicators of NPVs and IRRs? Is that something important, or you're looking at other aspects which developers are not even aware of right now?
Yes, I think it depends on the purpose of purchasing the carbon credit. I think so. For Marubeni at this moment, we purchase carbon credit for the business use. So as well as we offset our emission, then we market our carbon credit to someone, the customer. So that we need to see the customer's requirement as well. So then, of course, this is the thing. Okay. So then, of course, this is the remains business. So the business perspective. So that we need to secure the enough profit for make this project or sustainable. So that is why we need to see the profit level as well. Yeah. Then if we see the customer's requirement, in Japan, finally the compliance carbon credit market, which is GX ETS, will be open from next year. Then in this market, only J credit and also the JCM credit, which is carbon credit between two countries, joint crediting mechanism. So even we generate the carbon credit under BERA or gold standard, we cannot use this one to our
the compliance purpose.
Yes. So if we try to generate the carbon credit or purchase the carbon credit under BERA standard or gold standard, we need to catch the the customer like voluntary use. So nowadays not so voluntary market is not so robust, I think. So even we pay a lot for this project or purchase this carbon credit for business use, but it's difficult to secure the enough profit because of the low price at this
Right.
moment. So I think important thing is to catch the potential buyer first. Like, I'm not so sure the Symbiosis or Microsoft, I don't know, but
Sure.
excellent companies there. Then they have own requirement to buy the carbon credit. Then to know first that, then we, develop the carbon credit according to that requirement. That is the better way or something.
And when it comes to
Yeah.
upfront financing of
Yeah,
these
financing.
projects and not
Yes.
just offset purchase,
Yeah.
uh,
Yes.
in upfront financing, what are the specific documentation or preparation that a
Yeah, yeah.
project developer should have?
Mhm.
At what stage do you typically want to invest? What are the
Yeah.
documentation I should have
Mhm.
ready?
I think
Or this is also useful for my
yes.
personal
It is, I think, because there are a lot of developer here, so maybe. Yeah, I think it is matter of the balance of the budget and also the necessary volume of the carbon credit. So if the necessary volume is very small, like, or 1,000 tons of carbon credit or 10,000 tons, that is very small. If so, it's better to just purchase. That or player don't need to invest. So like MOL, our or partner, they are Ocean Line company. They have a lot of emission. So if so, they need to invest some project. Otherwise, or the purchase the carbon credit at spot price. That is very tough. So of course, maybe investing if we invest this project, we can purchase the carbon credit or secure the carbon credit with the price near the cost,
Correct.
But of course, opposite, instead of the good price, we need to take some risk as well.
Course.
Right. So that is also the matter of the balance of risk and merit or risk or returns also.
Sure. Thanks. In my experience also, I think uh, many of the end consumers or businesses are still not taking investment position into these projects. It is usually the last trench of retailers who are serving these end customers. They're the ones taking position on long-term bets on upfront financing. So even in India, some of the projects that have been financed by these retailers, European retailers, American retailers, uh, or potentially traders who are serving end users and not the end users themselves. And everybody's got very different requirements in terms of documentation, in terms of preparedness level. Symbiosis, like Takeshi-san mentioned, they had a 127-point checklist, which you had to provide information on. So everybody's got different um, matrix to assess these projects, and that's also something that needs to evolve into some level of standardization to help project developers, prepare before they actually go out in the market to source financing. Coming back to Amit, um, so you're involved in different kinds of, NbS projects right now. What are the top 3 areas of improvement for project developers that you see? Where do you most struggle with your projects? And let's make it quick. We don't need.
Hello. So that's a very difficult question to answer actually, because I would be
In a room full of project developers.
Yeah, no, but I think the challenges have been pretty adequately addressed during the first session. And one of the things is that interpretation of standards, the requirements. I'll give you, as I gave you an example of project area or project instance area. Now, project area of 1 hectare, in certain standard, the project area is a very broader area. But in terms of where, what do you consider a project area? Because if you look at census-based approach, a tree is an instance. So when you talk of that, then if you apply that same knowledge to the project area concept, then a single parcel of land becomes a project area. Then meeting that requirement. So that kind of an ambiguity where everybody and these standards, these rules and regulations are subject to interpretation. I may interpret it very differently. You may interpret it very differently. The standards interpret it very differently. So even if a project developer and the VVB somehow manage to come to a point where they agree, the standards would completely
not
disagree.
Correct.
So I think one of the major challenges is fulfilling the standards requirements, and other for project developers, I think they are grappling with a lot of issues with regards to constant chopping and changing of the standards. So I think that and level of documentation, which is also not very clear how, what extent and what all information do you need in terms of evidences to demonstrate compliances with the requirement standards.
Uh, and Shreya, can you please touch upon the transparency aspect, which which has been talked upon, integrity and transparency, especially with regards to what are the standards expecting?
Sure. So, as we all know that in the last 2 years, transparency, credibility, and traceability and benefit sharing are the main pillars of criticism or focus in the carbon markets. And these new age or the existing registries also, they're trying to remove the gray areas in this over these aspects. And when it comes to transparency, there are already steps that have been taken. So if we go back a couple of years, there were no data that was publicly available about the projects. Now all the area-based documentation, once a project is registered, is even visible at Vera. So, within a registry, you will be able to know if a project exists or not. However, there are still gaps. Inter-registry, there are no unified platforms.
Very important.
There are no unified platforms where a person could go at a unified platform and figure out, I want to go for a project in this area. Does a project already exist, or how do I find out? So there's no unified solution to that as of now.
So I could be developing a project under Vera, and you could be developing a project under GS on the same region. I mean,
Yeah.
At least on paper.
At least on paper, and it is often difficult to figure out who came first, because there might be certain farmers which you pursued first, and
Right.
there are certain farmers that I approach first, and there could be a conflict area leading to double counting, and
Correct.
again the whole.
Right. So this inter-registry play is very important. So a meta registry which has data from all different registries.
Yeah, I mean, I think it would be very difficult to build something at a global scale, but I think which could be a point of discussion in the next panel at a policy level, at national level, it could be thought about.
Great. Very interesting. Takeshi-san, if you could also suggest some ways of risk mitigation or de-risking some of these projects to make them more attractive for investors.
Yeah, so of course, the project already registered one is most, more safe. But in actual case, we every day, receive the amateur proposal as well. But I'll say at least, land eligibility should be secure. Yeah, a lot of proposal come to us every day, but I'll say land eligibility itself is also unsure. If so, we cannot consider.
Correct.
Then that is why. So we can, whether we can, use this land for carbon credit or not. That is the most important thing for us. First stage.
Right.
Yeah.
So I think that's what we also advise many of our project developers. The two very important aspects for securing carbon financing is one, have a proof of concept on the ground. So implement a small pilot, which you can take to investors and tell them that we need money to replicate this and scale it up. uh, and at least move forward in the registration cycle. You don't need to have a registered project, but at least it should not be a paper project. It should not just be a concept note. It's very important to move forward in the registration cycle, be as close to registration as possible. And these are two very clear ways of de-risking uh, for the investor as well, because they're not getting into a project which may or may not be registered at all, and they're developing the project with a project developer who has already implemented something on the ground, which means that they have this ability and connect with the community to potentially scale it up as well. Very clear two pathways, which I completely agree with Takeshi-san. Archit, you're the last one I'm coming to, and then we'll have possibly audience questions. Um, Given your global experience, I know you're on your fifth passport now. Given your kind of exposure to different types of projects globally, uh, can you give some examples of some very well planned and executed projects where they've been able to, you know, raise investment, sell credits, just so that people take away something positive from this discussions where we've been talking again about the issues and complexities.
Well, there are not a lot of projects to be talked about at this stage, to be honest, because most of them are under review by the standards, but which takes forever to get done, but it's okay. Um, Painkillers are available at the registration desk. So, with that, I think there is one use case where we worked on. It was a greenhouse project of Vera, VM42 again, and it was spread across 13 countries in Europe. And the average land holding size was, of course, way more than what we see in India. But at the same time, since they were spanning across 13 countries, that was quite challenging for us to review the data, assess the data, and then come up with the opinion as well. The beauty of that project was that the way that they maintained the databases and they backed it up with the KML files and the land records and the carbon rights and everything was put on cloud, and whoever wanted to see whatever can have access to that. So that level of transparency was something which was, I mean, not to sell the project here, but yes, it was really good. Uh, Another project that I can think from the top of my head is a non-Afilu project. It's a cook stove project being currently reviewed by Vera. It's in India, and what the developer is doing is that distributing only 15,000 cook stoves in one pocket, and they're calling it as one instance. And the project documents state that these 15,000 households will be surveyed at least once in each year. So that is something which is going beyond the requirements of the standards, that is going beyond sampling, and it is actually going up to a level of 100% monitoring in some sense. So those are the projects where I think the investors, the buyers are more confident in putting down the money.
Very interesting. I think I tend to agree that the use of technology to start with for data aggregation and providing that transparency to potential buyers and investors. That is something that's not been talked about much today, but that's a very important aspect. Uh, Second, I think use of technology for MRV facilitation as well. DMRV is something that we missed talking about. I think that's also a very important aspect uh, to not only manage highly aggregated projects like the ones you have in India, where you're talking about 10,000, 15,000 farmers, data being managed and monitored and verified. I think that's these are two areas where a lot of work is happening. There are a lot of new climate tech startups who are doing some very interesting work, not only in India but outside as well. Uh, India, definitely there's a lot happening. So we should continue to evaluate the kind of work that's happening on climate tech as well in the country, and some of them could actually be very suitable for your specific project. Uh, I think we're done with the discussion here, and happy to have any questions from the audience. I'm sure there'll be a few. Okay. And one here and one, please.
Thank you, Ayur. So, my question is mainly from the assessment point of view.
I'm sorry, if you can identify yourself and also
Yeah.
direct the question to one of us. Or
Yeah, so my name is Dr. Yahya. I am from iMentor Development Services. We are a company based in Delhi. And my question is basically from Amit from a assessment point of view. I just want to know if it is more of about auditing a project, and when we are going for an auditing, and since we are talking about using technology like remote sensing and GIS for biomass estimation and carbon credit calculation, so I just want to know if there is an accepted method or methodology which is mentioned that could be used for the biomass estimation in India? And if not, so what kind of discussions we are looking at around developing one in the community? Thank you.
Hello, thank you. So in terms of use of remote sensing and GIS technology and DMRV, which Jatin was also talking and Sopan also mentioned in his discussion in the morning. See, there are a lot of new evolving technologies which can certainly be used, but then there are methodologies where the methodologies have to undergo a change to allow use of those technologies. Remote sensing you can very well use, but there is nothing which specifically says that under remote sensing you have to use only this approach. The approach should be scientifically robust. That's what I understand. And then you have to determine uncertainty. And that uncertainty should be within, I think, within the materialistic threshold of what the standard allows or what the methodologist allows. So you have to ensure that whatever approach you use, it gives credible result with as minimum uncertainty as possible. And then, of course, in terms of when we are doing an assessment, we also use technology coupled with ground truthing just to ensure that whatever results are being claimed are very accurate. So just to answer your question, there is no approach which is clearly defined and there is no discussion, because then see that would be kind of micromanagement when you start telling people that you can only use NDV or you can only use this to assess biomass. So that's a discussion which is not happening and that should not happen at all. So you are free to use remote sensing, whichever method gives you the best result. Thank you.
Yeah. So, thank you. I think I'm hidden. Yeah. So, first of all, thank you very much for the very insightful discussion. My name is Lakhan Patidar, and I am from Global Green Growth Institute, an international intergovernmental organization of Republic of Korea. So my question is very simple. Anyone can answer. There we have talked about Vera gold standards, but is there any scope for Pure Earth in India, like for projects related to carbon removal? Or you can discuss what are some of the major challenges or the opportunities that we can have in the Pure Earth standard as well. Thank you.
Thank you for the question. So Pure Earth at the moment focuses on engineered carbon removals only. So unfortunately, however, nature-inspired removal is acceptable. So there are projects that are happening in India which are around enhanced rock weathering, which there are certain projects that are happening. I'm not sure if they're under Puro, but there are other registries also supporting enhanced rock weathering, and biochar also being one of the nature-inspired carbon solutions is largely being accepted in India, and projects from India are also quite popular, and India is one of the major exporters of biochar credits.
I think engineered biochar, of course, Puro has a few projects that are ongoing, and there are quite a few in the pipeline as well. I will come back to you, sir, please.
Hi, my name is Ashish Mandal. I work for a organization called Plum and Agro Private Limited. So question is like, it's little hypothetical situation. So a lot of discussion going on about tree plantation and all. So my question here is that suppose if I have about 100 hectares of land, and if there is an SOP that tells me that, this species generates this much of carbon, and that matures over a period of 4 years onwards, 5 years onwards, I start getting. So why can't there be a kind of a clearinghouse? I go there, I register my land, and then, I mean, there are investors other side. They choose my project, and largely it can be a kind of a, your remote sensing or Google Earth kind of a canopy cover that you can measure because you know which species gives you how much of credit. What is the need of a developer and then so much of monitoring, MRV and all? Yeah, I'm maybe it's maybe very stupid, but I'm trying to see from a farmer's point of view, if there is so much of intermediaries involved, and there is so much of uncertainties about, from the investor's mind and those whose land it is it going to is it ever going to take off?
Uh, so I think, what you're saying takes us back to the point where we need to understand why are we even generating carbon credits. The carbon credits are being generated so that some industries which are emitting CO2 can consume these carbon credits and become, you know,
There are buyers for carbon credit, and I am the generator of the carbon credit, right?
right.
Why should there be so many intermediaries? Very simple.
So
Just to, I think I hope you like the answer, but see, the role of all these parties here is also to ensure a certain degree of accountability and also to manage liability. So if you are directly selling to a buyer, if there is a shortfall, because you have to claim that, okay, he does an assessment and you doesn't, how does he invest in your project? Why does he buy from your project? Whether you would be able to assure him that you would be able to supply him this much amount of credit, because this is going towards meeting his compliance requirement where he is to be penalized. So you have to understand that your shortfall can lead to a penalty on his end. So he's trying to, with working with right partners, he tries to ensure accountability and also reduce liability. So probably in an ideal situation, you won't need any one of us. That could be an ideal situation where directly a buyer invests, but then also in terms of transaction cost, how much transaction cost would happen when he goes to all these small pockets of small farmers and then starts buying directly. So
Buyer trust that developer.
that's what I'm saying. Accountability.
How an investor trust a company, invests money in the stock exchange? How does it work?
So there are a lot of metrics around that.
So yeah, that's the point. So there is a market mechanism which is giving the investors and the confidence that where he can invest. So are we talking about developing such kind of situation? Or we are creating business for the developers and intermediaries? That's the point. Because the whole certification industry works on kind of, mistrust, and somebody is going and verifying it, like the cook stove that you talked about. You do 1,000 things, there will be a stage created on that particular day the auditor is coming to show you a cook stove just to, get the credit on that particular day. It
No,
happens.
I
It does
agree.
happen.
There are projects of all kinds, and the role of everybody involved is to weed out such projects exactly, and focus on quality projects. Raviji, you had some points. Joseph.
Specifically catering to the Indian. So can you call a standard if it is regionalized? Now, let me finish. The second is that in the panel, no, I'm saying we're talking of the standards being set by the Western countries and not adaptable to the Indian conditions and things like that. So my question is, And so there was a need for regionalization. So if you have regional standards, is that a standard? I mean, you're looking at a global standard in this case. So what is the biomedia between? It's not a standard if you have every country having its own standard, because there are countries with their own, ETS mechanisms and those kind of, and their standards as well. The second thing is there are a lot of auditors, experienced people here in this panel. At one level, the standards are very specific. At another level, the standards are, they give a principle. So what would you advocate for? More rules and you stick to the letter of the rule? Or you would call for less rules and more the spirit of the rules? Right? The third thing I want to say is that in the context of bringing more benefit to India, is it better to have, our own ETS, as we have the carbon trading scheme, to have our own methodologies? That is one. The second is, as investors, we are actually looking for these credits to be fungible across, different standards. So how do we bridge this gap in this? I mean, there seems to be a huge dilemma in multiple areas in this way. So anyone can answer.
I'll take the first point. I think standardization is very clearly happening in terms of one carbon credit being 1 ton of CO2 not produced or avoided or removed. When we're saying when we're talking about regionalization, we're talking about creating adaptability within the methodologies to allow for different types of project developers and different types of projects to participate in that market. That's the only provisioning that needs to be allowed within a particular methodology. All across, if you look at different types of voluntary markets in different countries or different compliance markets as well, the standardization is definitely happening, that the tradable commodity is always 1 ton of CO2, and that's exactly what Bureau of Energy Efficiency has also done now, moving from PAT and REC schemes to the CCTS domestic carbon scheme. This adoptability or provisioning for adoptability is something that is very much required. Otherwise, the possibility of projects being developed in India and India having to participate in the future voluntary carbon market is actually very bleak. We are not seeing any other project being developed right now besides nature-based projects, new projects, because everything else is either being phased out or is under severe media scrutiny. So there could be a scenario if this provisioning is not done, 10 years down the line, we may only have 2%, 3% participation in the global carbon markets, which for a country like India, with so many opportunities, is a very not a very likable situation to be. And that's where we were talking about possible lobbying happening in allowing for this.
I think, Ravi, also important to sort of clarify that maybe the need is not to have regional standards, but regional methodologies for sure. And Vera allows that. So you have in Vera methodologies for the US specifically. We had developed a RED Plus methodology only for India, which got approved. It's been phased out now. So it's also one of the things that we all can do is that we all need to develop methodologies. Right. There's very few that come out of India because it's a huge exercise. Resources are not available. In the US, there is a lot of funding available for this. It requires a year and a half. So we can have regional methodologies which take into context and the context, take into account the context of that place. That certainly is a possibility. The second is the Indian market is actually the Indian CCTS has taken a policy decision to not allow either Vera or Gold Standard as their methodology. So they are developing their own methodologies. They published the first 4 or 5. They're actually pretty fairly straightforward and simple in the way they're designed. And they are basing the methodologies off CDM mostly. So they are saying, and they also have a what they've also done is they have a process now for a quick review and approval of a new methodology that you want to submit, provided it's customized off CDM. The only challenge here is, so in the ideal world now, we should all be developing projects, submitting it to India CCTS. The India CCTS also says that if your project doesn't get used by a compliance buyer, you can sell it in the voluntary market. But what we'll need now is for international buyers to accept India CCTS as a standard. And you see the pushback that comes with it, because most of the international methodologies are backed by their buyers. Yeah. Yeah. I mean, that is a major problem. We've spoken about it for a decade. We haven't solved it. The standards themselves don't want it. So it's a complicated issue. The only way this can be solved is government regulation. So which is why I feel that the future is in regulated pathways for registration. And then look at CDM. Whatever you might say, CDM was a beautiful market because there was standardization. You didn't have the double counting challenge because there was a single registry. And now with government meta registries connecting, that architecture is the way to solve this, in my opinion. But that'll take some time. Till then, this is the pathway which we'll have to follow. But we should all develop methodologies. That at least that's an effort that people like us need to put in here.
One of the auditors wants to take the second part of the question.
I'd like to answer the third one, wherein the second one being very difficult. So, like Swapan already mentioned that India with its own CCTS is developing methodologies, which is an overarching on the CDM methodologies, which are already approved. And the simple answer is that we do not need to reinvent the wheel, but wherever there are enough references available, we should adopt them, which India is doing by default. And at the same time, it also presents an opportunity to just customize the agriculture projects methodologies or the RED Plus methodologies in such a fashion which are better suited for the Indian conditions.
We're still left with the second question.
I think the question was that whether we should follow the rules to the T or we should allow the spirit of the. I think it also depends upon a lot on professional judgment, because when you look at a project, you engage in discussions with the project developers, the stakeholders, and the people. Then and I always say that that has worked for me is that part of being an auditor is also to understand what to ignore. So we understand that there are certain things that if we get too fussy about, that would go against the spirit of the entire project. But then there are rules also for the purpose, because you can't allow everybody to go with the spirit of the rule, because then there would be mass violations of those rules. So then there would be.
It's not possible to a huge number of stakeholders involved to get one common thing consistent. You take the issue of free trial and informed consent. Will you be able to get 100% informed consent of people who own land in tribal areas, who in tribal areas who are not educated as well?
I would love to see an endeavor that has been made to reach out to 100% of them, at least. There could be challenges that they could not respond to your invitations, they could not come to your meetings, but you actually tried once, twice, thrice to reach out to those stakeholders, to invite them to a common platform, to provide their inputs, feedbacks, share their grievances. See, but I would love to see that endeavor. I cannot just accept that it is completely not possible to reach out to everyone.
I agree with that.
So that's where the spirit comes in. If I see, okay.
So you're talking of the spirit.
I
And
said
Swapan was talking a little bit more about the letter.
no, but then I said in terms of stakeholder engagement, there has to be an endeavor. So now if you say that in tribal area you have chosen that mobile-based feedback mechanism is what I'll choose, I'll not accept that, because that is not right means to reach a stakeholder in that region. So even you say that in my spirit, I'm trying to do that, that's not acceptable. So as I said, as an auditor, we also, because we see a lot of different projects all across the world, and then we understand where the intent is right, but the extent of implementation of that intent needs time. So there are mechanisms where you can allow the project developers to keep on carrying out with their endeavor and then reach the desired result. But in certain cases, you cannot allow them that space or that.
Yeah.
So
I agree with that. There must be a minimum thing that has to be met in all these. Anyway, I got the answer that you had. Thanks. Thank you.
So Ravi's got the long rope that he was seeking from the auditor.
So that's as well as anybody could have answered it. I think.
So Jatin, I think okay. So Jatin, we might have to kind of close this for now because lunch is.
Sure. So thanks everyone. I think this was a very interesting discussion. I hope the audience also found it to be useful. After lunch, we're going to talk about some really difficult questions around taxation and policy and regulations. I hope everybody sticks around. It's going to be a very interesting session. Thank you. Thanks everyone.